2020 was a turbulent year in the fight for racial justice after the death of George Floyd. Well, now it's 2021. So where are we in continuing that fight? For insight, I spoke with TraeAnna Holiday from the King County Equity Now.
King County Equity Now was really birthed out of decades of Black organizing in Seattle and beyond. And really, it is a policy and advocacy institute that is taking a lot of the barriers that our Black organizations and Black advocates and leaders have been facing over the years and moving things into policy and advocacy and really working with legislators to start changing the narrative here with regard to what it means to actually be about equity and Black liberation.
But speaking of which, what has the community collective action been like since the death of George Floyd?
To be honest, Amity, it has been on the rise. Honestly, I think it was kind of a wake-up call that many folks needed in and outside of Black community where, collectively people have said enough is enough. And we really have to be on the front lines and utilizing our voices as a collective means of power so that we can start to move the needle forward and really create the America that I believe all of us really want to see. And I think George Floyd's death was just that tip of the iceberg where I think so many people said, you know what, I can no longer stand for this. We've seen police brutality, police killings over the years, and it's just been exacerbating. So I think a lot of people really said, it's time for me to get outside and do something.
Do you think equity is becoming part of the everyday language now?
That's really, I think the hope really is that it is becoming it, but not just equity in terms of performative action or the word being thrown around because it's a trendy word right now or a trendy phrase, but that people begin to understand what equity really means. And it's very different from equality, right? And I think in the civil rights era, there was a real push for equality. And equity is about righting the wrongs of the past. Look, we are not fools to believe that this nation doesn't have atrocities in its past that need to be remanded. And equity is really that term that says, yes, it is now time for, it to pay up for that history and to really begin to showcase what equity means. That's a sense of agency. That's a sense of ownership. That's really bringing in the resources that are necessary for Black communities in particular to thrive. And when we see that, through data, when Black communities are invested in the right ways and really those harms are repaired so that reparations, right, repairing of rations can happen, it really is beneficial to everyone.
It really is. And that's a conversation that we've had a lot of, the difference between equity versus equality. And can you just make that final point one more time, that difference between the two?
There's an idea where you're looking over the fence at a ball field. Equality is each one has the same amount of stump to look over. But there are certain ethnicities in this country that are taller maybe than others. And so it doesn't mean that everybody is equally looking over the fence. Equity really is about the fact that, look, we need different types of stumps for different people because we have to be righting the wrongs of the past. When we think about slicing the pie, ultimately, it's not everybody getting the same slice. It is saying, look, there's people that have been given a very small sliver of this American pie for generation after generation. And now it is their turn to receive a larger slice because ultimately there's people that have been benefiting off of the backs of those getting that smaller slice. And so now it's time to really divvy up that pie in a way that allows for Black community to really have that ownership that's necessary. This is why land acquisition targets are so important. This is why so much work is being done to really push that needle around policy and legislation.
And that language is so important. Well, you also, among the other things you do, you have a podcast called Equity Rising. Congratulations on season 1. And I understand season 2 is about to start.
Yes, absolutely. This has been such an amazing project, honestly. In season 1, we were able to talk to people globally that were really equity change makers in their field. We talked to people in South Africa, in New Zealand, in France, and then a lot of people across the country that are working towards bringing equity in their own regard, whether it is housing, in arts, whether it's in community organizing, just a wide plethora. Because if I'm being honest, equity was not built into anything. So I'm always saying on almost every episode that equity now needs to be infused into everything. And so season 2, I'm so thankful that we have so many amazing local equity change makers right here doing amazing things. And our season 2 is really focusing in on their efforts of equity. We're talking to policymakers, we're talking to community organizers, we're talking to people that are working in, again, a wide variety of ranges, because it needs to be everywhere at this point.
And for a link to the Equity Rising podcast, just head over to New Day's website.